Thank you so much for joining us today as Hispanic Access Foundation releases our newest toolkit, Nuestro Mar, Nuestro Futuro, Our Ocean, Our Future. Please feel free to let us know who you are and where you're calling from in the chat. And we would also love to know in what ways do you currently engage with fisheries or seafood, whether that's you like to fish, you like to consume seafood, whatever that might be. We would love to hear from you in the chat as everyone joins in. Awesome. We have some San Diego representation. Oh, can you hear me? Someone in the chat says not able to hear. Fabio, maybe you want to rejoin. It looks like other folks can hear. We have Miami, Florida, Denver, Hillsborough, Virginia, Fremont, California, Colorado, Colombia, Lawrence, Massachusetts. And again, we'd love to know how you engage with fisheries or seafood. If you like to fish, if you like to consume seafood, what draws you here? Raymond says, I love seafood. Hope from South Florida PBS, we produce a marine science TV show and often interact with fisheries in the making of episodes. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here as we launch our new bilingual toolkit. And please continue to introduce yourselves in the chat and get settled in. I'd like to explain that we will have some interpretation. So we do have live interpretation with our wonderful translator, Natalia. Este webinar está siendo traducido en vivo. Si usted no habla inglés o prefiere escuchar el webinar en español, por favor haga clic en el botón de interpretación en su pantalla. So you can click interpretation with the globe icon at the bottom if you prefer to hear this webinar in Spanish. And please also note that we will have both the chat function and the Q&A function open and available. Please feel free to utilize both. And we will have some time for questions from the audience at the end. So please drop your questions into the Q&A box as they come to you. Any and all questions that you have, we'll get to as many as possible. So our agenda for today is that we will hear some welcoming remarks from our Director of Conservation, and then have a panel discussion and a presentation from the Monterey Bay Aquarium on a useful tool that all of us can incorporate into our lives regarding seafood. And lastly, we will have some time for questions. So I am thrilled today to introduce our lineup of panelists of marine science and fisheries experts. So we have Melissa Cristina Marquez, who is a bilingual Latina marine scientist, science communicator, and award-winning author currently pursuing her PhD. She provides free multilingual resources to educators and the public to foster greater understanding and appreciation of nature and its animals. Melissa's scientific research focuses on the ecology, conservation, and public perception of melasmobranchs, which includes sharks and rays, with a particular interest in how science can inform more equitable conservation policies. In addition to her scientific work, she's an internationally recognized science communicator dedicated to making science more inclusive, accessible, and engaging. As a proud Puerto Rican and Mexican woman in STEM, Melissa uses her voice to champion intersectional environmentalism, inspire the next generation of ocean advocates, and reframe the public narrative around sharks and the scientists who study them. So happy to have you here. We also have Kara Ezel, who's a program officer for the environment program at the Walton Family Foundation, where she focuses on ocean and sustainable fisheries. Based in the Washington, D.C. office, Kara joined the foundation from USAID, where she was an international program specialist. And prior to her role there, she worked as a budgets and contracts analyst for Harvest Plus. Kara received her Master's of Public Administration with a concentration in nonprofit management from George Mason University. We have Zatka Rebolledo Sanchez, who is an ecological sciences PhD candidate at Old Dominion University and a member of the Coastal Plant and Ecotone Ecology Lab, studying marine and coastal ecosystems from a spatial ecology perspective. She earned her undergraduate degree in biology from Simón Bolívar University in Caracas, Venezuela. And she is also a Virginia Sea Grant Graduate Research Fellow, as well as a Rising Tide Scholar of the Coastal and Estuarine Research Federation. And lastly, we have Tally Height as the Seafood Watch Outreach Partnership Lead at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Tally plays a vital role in empowering consumers, businesses, and community leaders to make informed, ocean-friendly seafood choices. She leads regional outreach and engagement efforts, building partnerships that connect science with action for sustainable seafood, with educators and more across North America. She's based in South Carolina with a BS in marine biology and an MS in fisheries science and management from James Cook University in Australia. And her early work focused on tropical reef ecology and sustainable aquaculture. When she's not working, you can find her underwater searching for those tiny invertebrates and biodiversity she works so hard to protect. So thank you once again for joining us as we release this toolkit. I think the links have been dropped in the chat if you'd like to follow along, where you can read it in either English or Spanish. And we're so excited to dive into conversation with these experts that we have with us today. And I'll be moderating. I'm Sofia Barbosa, the Ocean Program Manager here at the Hispanic Access Foundation. And I also wanted to note that Melissa and Zlatka were co-authors of this toolkit, so really happy to have them here. I will turn it over for some welcoming remarks from our Conservation Director, Melissa Morris, who holds a master's degree in marine biodiversity and conservation from Scripps Institute of Oceanography, and who has worked on several sustainable seafood initiatives throughout her career. So over to you, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Sophia, and thank you all for taking the time to join this webinar today. Just briefly, I would like to share our mission and vision here at Hispanic Access. Our mission is to connect Latinos with partners and opportunities to improve lives and to create an equitable society. Our vision here is that one day every Hispanic individual in the United States will enjoy good physical health, a healthy natural environment, a quality education, and economic success, along with the opportunity for civic engagement in their community with the goal of improving their futures here in America. Here, under the conservation team, you've been introduced to Sophia, our Oceans Program Manager. Additionally, we have a Waterways Program Manager, a Climate Manager, a Public Lands Program, and a Latino Conservation Week Coordinator. And speaking of, Latino Conservation Week is around the corner, starting in September. A little bit on this toolkit before the panelists and Sophia dive in deeper, but this toolkit is unique as it was developed by Hispanic Access Foundation, specifically curated and created for Latino communities to gain an understanding of and be able to advocate and champion for both sustainable fisheries and ocean conservation issues. This resource has been designed specifically for you as individuals and as community members to better understand the critical challenges facing both our ocean and fisheries today. From overfishing to habitat destruction to climate change and pollution, marine ecosystems are under great threat and pressure. The issues not only threaten ocean biodiversity, but the livelihoods and food security of many across not only our nation, but around the world. However, through informed choices and both individual and collective action, we can contribute to the health of our ocean, which is vital for both human health and planetary well-being. This toolkit, available both in English and Spanish, explains key issues and provides practical guidance on how to engage in sustainable seafood practices, empowering anyone and everyone to make decisions that support resilient fisheries and a thriving marine environment. Now, consuming seafood is cultural for many Latinos and Latinas. For centuries, the ocean has been central to Latin American life by feeding families, supporting livelihoods, and shaping rich cultural traditions. Many coastal communities still practice traditional fishing today, and the region is home to some of the world's most iconic seafood dishes, such as ceviche and pescado la veracruzana, or in my world, enchilado de camarones. Again, thank you so much for being here. I hope you take away great knowledge and use this tool as a resource.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And again, the links are in the chat if you want to open it up. And as Melissa said, we really made this in a way that's digestible. We have like little blurbs with definitions in the toolkit, and it's not, I promise it's not overly scientific. But with that, I'd love to start the conversation with our panelists here and kind of zoom out and start with the big picture. So why is the ocean essential, not just for communities and food, but really for all life on Earth? Melissa, for it.
Hey, we'll just dive right into it. El Océano is basically the life support system of our planet. It produces at least half of the oxygen that we breathe. It absorbs a huge chunk of the CO2 that we emit, and it regulates the climate so we can actually live comfortably. So, not only that, but it's also home to an incredible biodiversity, from the tiniest of plankton to the biggest animal ever, the blue whale. And it's not only important for coastal communities, it impacts everyone, everywhere. So without a healthy ocean, there's no healthy planeta.
Anyone else want to jump in? Kara.
Thank you. Yes, it's so good to see all of you. I'm so honored to be on this panel with everyone. I did just want to reiterate one point. So although it's not the only thing the ocean does for us, roughly 3 billion people worldwide rely on seafood as their primary source of protein. So in addition to all of these life-giving forces, it is such an important food resource for so many of us. So not just because it's delicious, but because it's nutritionally really, really important.
Yes, thank you. That's a really good point to think about, the fact that 3 billion people rely on seafood for, the main source of protein, and what that means for how we take care of the ocean to ensure that we can have, that access to those food sources. Would anyone like to touch on, Melissa, like what you shared about, you don't have to live near the ocean for it to be important for you and impact your life? So would love to hear if anyone wants to expand on that a little bit more, like that ocean connection to how it regulates, weather or climate, or how it impacts your life, even if you don't live near it. Zlatka, go ahead.
I think something very important. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this webinar. It's the air we breathe, as Melissa mentioned. It's very, we depend on the ocean for all our life, but even keeping that air in good conditions and trying to, like, all that carbon that it's captured and all these amazing benefits that we have, that it's hard sometimes to count and to picture and to make those connections when we're not really close to the ocean. but also other resources that we use for medical practices or chemicals and many different things that the ocean also provides to us, even if we are not working directly in the fisheries world or in the conservation world. We are using and we are being, we receive all those resources and all those benefits from medicine and all these other areas.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think like much of the population lives near the coast, right? But for some of us, it can feel so distant, the ocean. But then when we think about it, our planet is 71% ocean, right? Which is almost 3/4. Thank you so much. So when we talk about fisheries, can we break that down? What exactly does that mean? How can we understand this term and what it includes or refers to? Tally.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so a fishery can be defined in a lot of different ways, but typically when we talk about a fishery, we're talking about an area or a population of fish that live in a general area that's defined generally by the governing body around like where the coastal or the fishery is happening. So like a fishery might be defined slightly differently by the United States versus by Mexico, for example, but the fishery includes both commercial fishing as well as recreational fishing, which is why fisheries have so many different stakeholders that always need to be considered and can be sometimes contentious as how they are, what borders define them in each area.
Thank you, Tally. And going further, just, for say some folks aren't sure, can you share what the difference is between commercial and recreational fishing?
Yes, so commercial fishing is going to be any fishing that's occurring that is intended to sell for product in mass. And recreational fishing can be any fishing that's done by an individual, whether it's for consumption or not. So you can be a commercial fisher and choose to participate only in catch and release, or be a recreational fisher and choose to only catch and release, or be a recreational fisher for your own sustenance.
Thank you. Melissa, go ahead, and then Kara.
I was also going to say, when we're talking about fisheries, we're talking more about just the fishing boats catching the fish. It's the entire system. It's the people, the species, the habitats, the tools, and the rules that are involved in harvesting fish and other seafood, whether it be for food, for medicine, or ornamental purposes. And that, of course, also includes the wild capture from the open ocean all the way to aquaculture, which is fish farming. So it really is more than just catching fish. It's a network that connects economies and cultures and ecosystems throughout the world.
Yeah, thanks. And I just wanted to build on what Tally said about recreational fishing. You might sometimes hear it called subsistence fishing when people are fishing for their own consumption or even for their neighbors or friends. In a lot of cultures, that subsistence fishing and that way of life is really culturally important, even beyond the economic or even, nutritional value, but that relationship with the ocean and with the process of catching the fish. And also as someone who came into fisheries without a fisheries or scientific background, it can be so confusing and the language can be really muddying. But I just think about it as like fisheries are where we talk about when humans take fish out of the water for human purposes. So I don't know if that's helpful for anyone or not, but that's the way I think about it in my head.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's very helpful in clarifying kind of like our relationship with fish and why it needs to be managed, for whether it's for recreational purposes or consumption or like these larger commercial purposes. Thank you so much. And going into like our next kind of deep dive question, why should fisheries matter to everyone? And secondly, from your perspective, what are the most important challenges and threats that fisheries are facing today, right? Which are many, but how can we shed some light on what those key challenges are and what's really going on? Why should we care about this issue? Melissa, go ahead.
Thanks. Whether you live in a coastal town or the middle of the desert, you still depend on the ocean. You know, fisheries provide proteins for billions of people, jobs for millions, and a cultural identity for countless communities. Not to mention that they also keep ecosystems balanced. So if we lose key species, the ripple effects are massive. Um, right now, fisheries are under a lot of pressure. You know, that you've got rising ocean temperatures are changing where species live and where they're breeding. Lower pH levels from ocean acidification are weakening shells, disrupting food webs. Plastic pollution is choking marine life, and that can actually literally physically end up on your dinner plate. You've got, of course, bioaccumulation of toxins that move up the food chain, so it's affecting both animals and humans. And we're losing critical habitats like coral reefs, mangroves, seagrass beds, all that serve as nurseries. You've got bycatch, which is when non-target species like turtles or sharks get caught. And bycatch itself kills millions of animals each year. And then, of course, you have IUU, or illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, which undermines then conservation and sustainability efforts worldwide. You've got all of this put together, and then you've got overfishing, which is one of the biggest threats, you know, taking too much too fast, without giving populations a chance to recover. So it's a lot for our oceans to kind of deal with. And if we want a healthy ocean and a thriving planet, we need to protect our fisheries now for, how do I say this in English? Por el bien de todos, for the good of all.
Thank you, Melissa. And something I'd like to highlight, if anyone would want to speak to it more, is you mentioned bioaccumulation. So maybe like breaking down kind of what that is, what that means, and how it can impact us on our dinner plate, as you mentioned. Tally, go ahead.
Okay, I wasn't going to speak to bioaccumulation, but I was just going to build really quickly on something that
No
Melissa
worries, we
just
can
said,
come back
which
to it.
thank you. I was just going to emphasize in terms of the section of the question about the most important challenges that we're facing. Melissa mentioned IUU fishing, which, as she said, is illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And from my perspective, I believe that one of the most important challenges that is constantly developing, there's so many important technological advances in fishing, is traceability. So the increase of traceability worldwide is going to benefit fisheries, communities, consumers so greatly. And it's a push that I really champion because it can cut down on, you know, like the risk of slavery, like just I'm like at a loss because it can just improve so many aspects of fishing industries and drive advancements and conservation efforts forward because we can be more sure about where our seafood comes from and know that it's from a sustainable source. So I'll get into this later, but so much of my work at Seafood Watch demands that you know what the source of the seafood was and how it was caught. And so often the roadblocks that we're met with as consumers is that we just don't have answers for that from our fishmonger or our server, or whoever we're discussing our seafood with. And so the increase in traceability is, in my opinion, the most important challenge and future for sustainable seafood.
I wanted to dive into the bioaccumulation portion. So bioaccumulation, it's when it could be metal, it could be plastic, that goes inside of the organisms and stay there. So with microplastics now, a lot of people are talking about it. And you have small organisms, let's say a shrimp, that may have a little bit of it, but it's not too much. But when we go through the food web, when like larger organisms end up with massive amount of plastics or mercury or many other toxins that are in our oceans. So if we eat them, if we eat these huge fishes, that will end up our bodies. So we also have that bioaccumulation with time. So yeah, if we're going to eat some of these fishes or different seafood items, if we have, let's say, clams or oysters or small things, will be a little bit better. But it's like that. It's something very that can be mentioned very visually, and we have some infographics in the toolkit, so hopefully you can see and yeah, and play with that. I think there is also in the Instagram account. So yeah, feel free to share that information as well. I think it's very, very useful to understand like what we should focus on and what we should avoid.
Yeah, thank you, Zetka. And I think that's a really good connection to show how, on land pollution or any pollution that might make its way eventually to the ocean can then have this ripple effect of building up in the organisms and then impacting humans and human health as we consume them. So that's a good tip to take away. Like, it can sometimes be better to consume organisms like small lower on the food chain that might have less accumulation of these pollutants and toxins. Any other challenges of the many that someone wants to speak on, and feel free to just jump in. I'd love to know if we can maybe break down the term bycatch. And Melissa, you mentioned it, but if someone wants to kind of give, like, what does that mean and how does that happen? Why is that not good thing? Tally, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. So the term bycatch, as Melissa mentioned earlier, is referring to any organism at all, whether commercially available or not, that is caught unintentionally in the fishing process. So very seldomly, bycatch can be caught. So like say you're fishing for tuna and you catch a salmon. I mean, that would never happen, but let's just say salmon is commercially available. So there's very seldom opportunities that bycatch could find its way into the marketplace. But most of the time, the vast majority of the time, when you catch something that you're not intending to catch, it does die unnecessarily and it's unintended, but it is still tragic. And bycatch can happen as a result of fishing methods. So there are certain fishing methods that have lower levels of bycatch and certain fishing methods that have higher levels of bycatch. And a small example would be like fisheries that utilize pole and line, where there's one line and one hook that's reeled in as soon as there's a bite, would be very low bycatch. And that's because you have specialized bait and specialized hook, and you know where the thing that you want to find is. So you're in a general area, you think you're going to have good success. But on the off chance that you do catch something that you didn't intend to, you can just take it off the hook and throw it back. No harm, no foul. But then there's other fishing methods that are generally more massive. So like they're happening all at once, like think big nets that are like soaked in the water for a really long time, where bycatch levels are much higher. And that's something in fishery science that we're constantly looking to limit bycatch as much as possible, because it is so degrading to the general environment and ecosystem of the fishery that you're participating in.
Thank you so much for that breakdown. And it's something that happens, right? Like, we can't see it below the surface, or if it's like offshore, but you can't imagine like this unintentional, I guess, like hunting, right, of species that then aren't even needed and oftentimes can die. So definitely an issue to be addressed. Kara.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's another example of bycatch that comes up in the news, especially in the United States, from time to time, and that's whale bycatch. So when whales get tangled up in fishing lines, especially from things like crab or lobster traps, the lines that go all the way from the seafloor up to the surface, so the fishermen know where their pot is. the whales can get tangled up in that and then unfortunately pass away. And so that comes up in the news sometimes when a whale will wash up on shore entangled in fishing gear. And that's, one very big notable example of bycatch.
Thank you for highlighting that. I think that is one example that gets a little bit more like attention. So that's a good example to, all of us that see those headlines, that is bycatch. Well, thank you for touching on these different issues. We talked about overfishing, rising ocean temperatures that impact fish and their well-being and migration, bioaccumulation. We learned about bycatch and IUU, illegal, underreported, and unregulated fishing, where we don't know where that fish is coming from or how it was caught. We can't assure its sustainability. So I'd love to talk a little bit about solutions. What can we do? So I'm wondering, Melissa, if you could kind of walk us through some of the basics of fisheries management. So we learned what fisheries are. What does it mean to manage them? And what are some tools or terms that we should all be aware of that help ensure sustainable and healthy fish populations?
Claro, yeah. So fisheries management is basically how we make sure we can keep fishing without emptying the ocean. So it combines science, policy, and community input to balance what we take with what the ecosystem can handle. Some of the key tools include catch limits or quotas, so how much we can harvest in a season. There's size limits, so young fish have time to grow and reproduce. You've got seasonal closures during spawning periods to protect baby fish. Marine protected areas, or MPAs, you would have seen them referenced as that, and that's where fishing can be restricted or banned to let certain populations recover. We've been talking about bycatch. There are bycatch reduction devices for some specific animals, and there's gear modifications that help avoid catching non-target species, such as sea turtles is a really popular one that is quite famous with their, I think it's called TED, turtle exclusionary device. And then, of course, you've got monitoring and enforcement. So the rules aren't just words on paper. It's all a bit kind of like, I liken it almost in a way of like managing a bank account. So if you take out more than you put in, eventually you're going to go broke. Fisheries management is exactly like that. It keeps the ocean's bank account balanced so it can last many generations.
Thank you. And that's a great analogy. Like at the end of the day, it's kind of mathematical, like ensuring certain species have time, right, to like reproduce or are fished at the right times in order to make sure we can like utilize that resource, but in a way that's sustainable for the long term. So thank you so much. Kara, I wanted to ask you, in your role as program officer at Walton Family Foundation, you manage a portfolio of sustainable fisheries projects across the country. And I'm wondering if you could share an example or examples of a successful project that you've seen and what you think made it effective.
Yeah, absolutely. So the most successful projects I've seen are when people are able to come together to work on shared solutions. We have a lot of partners who work in coalitions, and one of the coalitions I'm thinking of is the Fishing Communities Coalition. It's a group of 7 community-based, conservation-minded commercial fishing organizations, but they work together to identify and advance their shared priorities. So they'll do things like education campaigns. They work together to identify best practices within their communities to both help the fishermen make a good living, make sure that their families are taken care of, but also make sure that they're taking care of the resource so that it will be there to continue to sustain them in the future. Sometimes working with people adds some complications that maybe just working on the water doesn't, around, if there's not 100% agreement, or if people maybe prioritize things differently. But when they are able to find these things that they all want to work on together and really speak with that unified voice, we see a lot more success. So we love when we can find opportunities to help elevate, community needs and what the community wants with really powerful advocates, and helping them empower themselves to do that shared work. I also want to address one question in the chat about dead zones and garbage, and totally agree, those are such big issues, and they also generally start on land, like we mentioned. So the Walton Family Foundation actually does have a project that works on farm nutrient pollution runoff because of the impact to the dead zone in the Gulf. So you know, we know that to address a lot of those ocean issues, you have to start with people's behavior on land. So but the exciting thing is that there's so many people that want to do that work and that want to join together and want to, you know, work together. So, you know, we've been able to find a lot of really incredible partners like Hispanic Access Foundation that are able to bring people together to have the conversations and to find productive ways to improve things. So.
Amazing. Thank you, Kara, for sharing both about the work you're doing with commercial fisheries and on the plastic side. And if you'd like, feel free to drop any links in the chat in case people want to check it out further as well. Zlatka, I wanted to ask you, for people that fish recreationally, you know, with family or friends and community leaders, what are some simple but powerful actions that people can take to make sure they're protecting marine life while they're still enjoying fishing?
Great. Thank you, Sophia. I would say the first thing, it's no, like if you need any permits, depending on where you're fishing, the region or the state, you will need specific permits. And maybe some laws change from where you're from. If you're fishing in another state or in another area, just keep you informed. It's very, very important. First thing that you need to know. Then sometimes you may need to report your catch. It will depend on what you are fishing and in all those regulations that are like depending on the size. Sometimes you have to release again or things like that. You need to be very, very aware of it. Another thing that it's very important, and I think it was in the chat for a moment, about avoiding the habitats, avoiding damaging the habitats. It's at all cost. So it could be like with the different devices or exclusion things, or just trying to be more, try to advocate for others as well and let other people involved in fisheries and they're getting excited and they're just starting as recreational fishers. It's very important to share this information. And try to avoid ghost gear. That's when sometimes you forgot a line or you forgot something and it stays there and it's going to keep fishing things randomly. And it creates a great impact on different populations. So just to be aware of that. And if you see it, try to remove it. That will save a lot of lives probably. And just as Melissa mentioned, the marine protected areas, respect them. If there are specific signs, if there are specific zones that you cannot fish, it's for a reason. And yeah, just try to be aware of those and to don't fish where you're not allowed. And sometimes it could be a threat for you. It could be, I don't know, there is an alarm, there is some toxins, there are some things that you cannot even go into the water. And if you go, if you're not aware that it's happening or you don't pay attention to those signs, you could get sick if you eat from those areas or if you go into the water. So it's something that protects not only the marine life, it also protects us. So just to be aware of those changes and be very supportive of others. And sometimes if you don't understand something because it's in English, try to see a translation. And sometimes some states and some areas you might find information also in Spanish. So yeah, or use the resources that Hispanic Access have so you can keep updates on what it's available.
Thank you so much. And great point about the ghost gear then can accidentally bycatch, right? Like this gear that's left behind that animals will keep getting caught in. So speaking of that, the way that something is caught or fished can have a really different environmental impact. So Melissa, I was wondering if you could touch on that a little bit and on the different fishing methods and what their different environmental impacts are.
Yeah, definitely. So has been kind of talked about lately, there are quite a few fishing method the fishing methods, and not all of them are created equal. Some of them are a bit more sustainable, otros not so much. So you've got, of course, hook and line, which is also known as pole and line or trolling, and that's targeted low bycatch, less habitat damage. Then you've got purse seine nets. That's good for schooling fish like tuna, but of course it can catch non-target species if you're not careful. You've got long lines, which can stretch for miles and accidentally hook turtles, sharks, and seabirds unless they've been modified with bycatch reducing tech. You've got trawling or bottom or midwater trawling, which you might have seen in the newest David Attenborough documentary. There's a really hauntingly sad little expert bit where it just shows you how devastating trawling can be. It's super efficient, but it is destructive, especially bottom trawling with scrapes habitats like coral reefs or seafloor communities. You've got gill nets, which are effective, but they often entangle unintended species, including marine mammals. And then pot and trap fishing, which is often used for like lobsters and crabs, tends to have a lower habitat impact if it's managed, but ghost gear, of course, can be a problem if traps are lost. This is just a few of the different kind of fishing methods. I'm sure there's many of them and many others that I'm forgetting and are more specialized to specific locations. But at the end of the day, the how matters as much as the how much. So choosing methods and technologies that reduce harm makes a huge difference for ocean health.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And that's something else you can read more about in the toolkit as well and learn about the different fishing methods and how some can be much more destructive than others. So thank you. With that, I would like to bring the slides back up and hand it over now to Tally, who's the Seafood Watch Outreach Partnership Lead from the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And she's going to be sharing about what Seafood Watch is and how it supports sustainable fisheries through food choices. So over to you, Tally.
Okay, thank you so much. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So in the toolkit, Seafood Watch is mentioned, so I'm just going to give a brief overview of what we do and how you can utilize Seafood Watch when you're making your shopping and dining decisions in the future. So the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch program is intended for consumers so that they can make healthy buying decisions, but we've also expanded our reach into helping businesses as well. So what we are is we're a ratings organization and not a certification body, which means that we rate fisheries and aquaculture industries non-voluntarily. So you can't get out of getting rated from us if that's what we want to do. And we prioritize fisheries that are important on the North American market. So we rate globally, but how we prioritize our work is the North American market and what consumers will see when they're shopping or dining. We can go to the next slide. We have some criteria for both wild fisheries and aquaculture. So I'm just going to go through them really quick. And we've touched on a lot of these criteria today already. So that's really great. So with our wild fisheries, we have 4 criteria that we look at. So each of these 4 criteria are going to get assessed by our science team, and they're going to earn a numerical score. And at the end of the assessment process, those 4 numerical scores combined the total score that relates to our final recommendation. So the fishery standards that we look at are impacts on the stock. So that's the target species, what we actually are intending to catch. Is that stock healthy? Is it being overfished? Is overfishing occurring, right? The second criteria that we're going to look at is impacts on other species. So we touched on this already today, which is fantastic. That's going to be any bycatch that's caught in the fishing process, right? And if there's bycatch being caught, part of that scoring assesses what bycatch reduction devices are being utilized or not utilized in the fishery. The third thing that we look at is management effectiveness. So, you could have a really healthy fishery that's got really great population health. It's not, people are fishing in a way that's not really destructive to the habitat or to the other animals, but there's just like no regulation in place that assures that that behavior will continue. So we want to make sure that there's management in place that is conservative so that we have assurance that the health of the fishery will continue into the future. And lastly, we look at the impacts the fishery has on the surrounding ecosystem. So is there destruction happening, like with some trawling fisheries that was just mentioned by Melissa, unnecessarily, that affects the health of the ecosystem negatively for all animals involved, not just the target fishery. So our aquaculture standard, as you can see here, is a little bit more complex. There are 10 aquaculture standards. I'm not going to go through all of these, but the main takeaway that you should know is that part of the reason that there are 10 standards for aquaculture is because aquaculture is so highly varied. Aquaculture can happen in rivers, it can happen in the middle of the ocean, and it can happen on land, completely landlocked in a totally enclosed system. So there's a lot of factors to consider. And some of these criteria aren't applicable to every aquaculture venture. So they would just be omitted. But just some that I want to flag that maybe people wouldn't often think about is like feed, the fifth or the top right of the criteria here. So when you're growing any seafood product, you might think, oh, this is inherently sustainable because you're taking a stressor off the ocean and you're not taking wild populations away from their natural habitat. But often what happens in fish farming is that fish are omnivores or carnivores, and the feed that they are being fed to fatten them up and grow them big and strong for us to consume and have a great product is coming from a wild source. And so we have to look at the wild source of that feed. Is it healthy? Is the fishing that's happening there aligning with the 4 criteria that I just went over? So that's one complex part of assessing an aquaculture industry. And then some of the other ones I just like to flag is like chemical use. Like, are we spilling out chemicals into the surrounding environment just to treat the animals that we're trying to raise? And is that negatively affecting our wild populations? All of this information is available on the website. So if you're interested in any of these, you can check it out. I just won't go through them all right now. We can go to the next slide. So our recommendations, we use a stoplight system. So green is going to be our best choice. So we recommend that you buy these first. These are going to be fished or farmed in ways that we deem by our criteria and by our standards to be very environmentally sustainable. So they're big thumbs up from us. The next is going to be good alternative. This is still a buy. We just want to flag that there are some issues that we would like to see improved upon. So we say, if you can't find best choice, go for your good alternative. But if there's a good alternative option right along with the best choice option, go for the best choice first. And then lastly, we have avoid. These are going to be our red rated items. And these are going to be caught or farmed in ways that we deem by our criteria and our standards to be not environmentally sustainable. We hope to see improvement in these industries, but for now, we recommend that you take a pass and you do not buy these products. So our recommendations, we have over 5,000. They're all housed on our website and you can search through all of them. You can go to our website and press recommendations and then search by species, which is fantastic. You can search common names or scientific names, whatever you prefer. And what I really like to point out here is that we have these really fantastic filters. So if you're searching for trout, for example, and you know you want to get trout from the United States and you know you want to get a farmed trout, you can filter your results because often with one single species, there could be dozens of recommendations. So these tools are really helpful for consumers to like cut out some of that noise because it can be overwhelming at times, and we recognize that. And then some of the other, we can go to the next slide. Some of the other great consumer resources that are on our website and also in a lot of our partner organizations, including the Monterey Bay Aquarium, are our consumer guides. So instead of searching through thousands of recommendations, say you need something a little bit more honed in, we have 13 species guides and 10 regional guides. So the regional guides are curated for distinct regions across the United States, and 3 of the regional guides are available in Spanish, the National, the West Coast, and the Southwest. They are printed and they're paper and they fold and you can put them in your wallet if you happen to be at one of our partner organizations, or you can find them on our website on your phone and save them to your device. And then our species guides are more honed into a singular species. So if you're like, I know I really just like to eat tuna, the species guides are going to go into exactly what you need to look for when you're in the grocery store or when you're out dining, for the questions that you need to ask or the things that you need to look for to ensure that you can get the tuna that you want, but in a sustainable way. And then lastly, just want to leave you with some tips of what you can do as consumers to support a healthy ocean and healthy fisheries. So like I said, if you just know you like to eat tuna, go ahead and familiarize yourself with the sustainability of the species that you like to consume so that you don't have to constantly like recheck the website, you know, just like study up a little bit. That's a great tool. And then find trusted grocery stores. You know, we have some major buyer partners that are available on our website. So like, for example, Whole Foods only buys green and yellow wild seafood. So you can kind of turn your brain off if you wanted to shop there. And the last thing that we love to ask people to do is to get loud. So asking your server or your fishmonger, do you sell sustainable seafood? Even when the answer is, I don't know, is an incredibly impactful action that drives market change from the bottom up. And that is it for me. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tally. So much great information. And again, we'll share the recording after. And we have a script in the toolkit of if you want to ask your server if they're serving sustainable seafood, you can read right off the script. So that's a great action that you can take. We have some really good questions, so we'll dive in, and panelists, just feel free to jump in if you would like to respond. So we have a great question from Fabio. There's a great deal of controversy about farmed fish versus wild fish. How is that evolving? I try to avoid farmed fish at the supermarket, but more and more I see only farmed fish at the counter being offered, or the price for wild catch is way too high for the family budget. Tally.
Yeah, I would love to take this one. Unfortunately, fish farming, which is also aquaculture, I saw your other question, Fabio. It's the same thing. Unfortunately, fish farming has kind of gotten a dirty name and reputation, and it's really undeserved. Aquaculture makes up about 50% of the total gross product of seafood that's available in the global market. And while there are some red rated and unsustainable aquaculture organizations, I won't like put anyone on blast. There are some unsustainable industries within aquaculture. There's a lot of really sustainable aquaculture. So really using the blanket wild good, aquaculture bad is, unfortunately, it's not that simple, which is kind of a reoccurring theme throughout all of seafood sustainability, is that it can be complex. But there's lots of really sustainable aquaculture. And one that's really great is all mussels, clams, oysters. Great, super sustainable option that is farmed.
Thank you. Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, I just want to really quickly add to what Tally says. You know, the key is not wild versus farmed as a good versus bad debate. It's how they're managed. You know, both can be sustainable, both can be destructive. The goal is responsible practices that give us healthy seafood in a sustainable ocean.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent point. And Fabio also asked, is there anyone working on a sustainable label or stamp, much like the organic products already available? And maybe this is a good opportunity to highlight some of the other, certifications that exist that we can take a look at, right? Tally?
Yes. So those certification schemes do exist and they do really great impactful work. So some examples would be Marine Stewardship Council. It's going to be abbreviated most of the time MSC. And those are going to be, those certification bodies will put their symbol on pack. So like on a can of tuna or on a packaged product, or if you're at say like a fishmonger stand, usually on the like little stick that is indicating what the fish is, it'll say it's MSC or ASC certified. And there's so many certification bodies that do great work. The one difference between certification bodies and Seafood Watch, who I work for, is that certification bodies are voluntary. So you submit to be certified and basically ask for that to happen. So there's not even coverage globally. And we have a partnership with Marine Stewardship Council and Aquaculture Stewardship Council, such a mouthful. And you can find all of the certifications that Seafood Watch recommends also on our website. They will come up under the recommendations as well. And instead of being green, yellow, or red, they're just blue.
Thank you so much, Tali. And we do feature this in the toolkit as well. Some of the top certifications that you can look for, some that are, specifically towards wild caught fish, and some towards farm fish or aquaculture. We have another really interesting question. Curious about the panelists' thoughts on the sustainability of cell-based or plant-based seafood options. Melissa.
So cell-based or cultivated or plant-based seafood does have some exciting technologies that could really play an important role in future sustainability. The idea is to reduce pressure on wild populations and lessen environmental impacts like pollution, excessive water usage, habitat destruction, because it grows marine tissues in labs without the need to fish or farm, potentially kind of avoiding problems like species escapes, disease, contamination of natural waters. These are still early days from what I've seen, and somebody more in like Kara or Tali or Slaka might know a bit more. From my understanding, it seems to be this is quite early days. There's quite a few challenges, including the energy that's required to produce these products and, of course, the cultural acceptance. They're not a magical solution, but are kind of a part of a broader menu of options that are needed to feed the world. I personally see a lot of potential, but I also think that we need to keep caring for and restoring our natural marine populations, because even though innovation is key in sustainability and conservation, so is conservation.
Kara, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it could be potentially really exciting. I've also seen a little bit of data that suggests that the inputs required to feed the initial cell growth could be a type of sugar that could be not sustainable and require additional monoculture on our terrestrial lands in a way that's maybe not beneficial, but I haven't seen full life cycle analyses of this yet. So I think it's definitely, like Melissa said, like we're in early days and I don't know that we can make any firm conclusions, because also like with our seafood, I doubt there'll be a one clear answer. It might be the way some companies do it is great, and the way some companies do it is maybe not as beneficial. So I guess that's more of a stay tuned than a clear answer.
Thank you. And it might be something that's not accessible, right, to fishers that are subsistence or like coastal communities, like we don't necessarily want to replace their livelihoods or cultural connections. But thank you so much. We'll bring the slides back up to round us out. Thank you to our panelists for joining us today. And if we weren't able to answer your question, or if you have further questions, please feel free to reach out. I would like to leave you with a call to action that we have at the bottom of our toolkit. If you'd like to take the next step and join this pledge for Nuestro Mar, Nuestro Futuro, our ocean, our future. We should be dropping the link into the chat, and by signing on to this pledge, you're committing to being mindful of how your actions on land and at sea impact marine and coastal ecosystems, committing to purchasing seafood products that have been certified for sustainability, and we will follow up with you with more information. So we encourage you to sign the pledge and make this commitment in your life, and how your individual and all of our collective action can have an impact. And lastly, if you'd like to take it even further, you can consider joining the Hispanic Access Conservation Network, which Melissa and Zlatka are both members of. This network connects, builds, and empowers Latino professionals across all of our environmental and conservation work, and provides an opportunity for you to give input and be actively engaged in our efforts. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining today. Thank you to all of our panelists, our interpreter, and all of you for taking the time to learn about this issue. Please feel free to reach out with any questions that you have, or if you'd like to get further engaged, and have a wonderful day. Thank you for coming to learn about our ocean and sustainable fisheries.